profit pie for us to wind up in a perfectly competitive world. Instead, we've got these, I'll say, dozen firms, something much more competitive at least than an oligopoly, which again, we're just not going to spend much time with. All right. But nonetheless, that they kind of gobble each other up to the point where there's one that, because of their technology, which we talked about earlier, or because of their cost structure we talked about earlier, are able to kind of stay in it and fight everybody off, and then we wind up back towards monopoly. Okay, so in the end, when you think about monopolistic competition measured against perfect competition, we still have some problems, right? We still have some problems, okay? So again, it's still inefficient, and we got two externalities: product variety and business stealing. Okay, now what we're going to do, again, because I want to move the class along, is we're going to skip the section on monopolies, and what I want to do is move us forward to controversies over antitrust. So if you look at your outline, this is under economics of cooperation, and let's look at some controversies over antitrust. Now, again, I'm a big believer that economics can inform policy. Again, whether I'm teaching political science or finance, I like to make mention of these things, because it's one thing to look at it in terms of theory, but in terms of kind of the practicality and exactly what government can or cannot do, or should not do, in terms of managing the economy to protect consumers, or, again, in the case of workers, again, what they can do. So I want to talk about a couple of realities that pop up in antitrust. Now, I've written on every one of these, actually, in one way or another, mostly associated with the European Union. But what I want to do is look at some controversies over antitrust, and look at three possibilities, things that pop up every now and again. Now, if you remember just the basics of antitrust law is designed to break up power, right? Firms that have too much power. So either we have this huge firm that has way too much power, we're going to break it up, or what we're going to do is prohibit firms from coming together that we know would have too much power, right? And if you remember last time we met, we talked about a horizontal merger, right? Two firms at the same level of production and activity. Coke merging with Pepsi, right? That would be a horizontal merger, all right? And vertical mergers, right? So we talked about Coca-Cola owning all of its bottlers, right? Coca-Cola owning all the retail outlets, things of that nature. Okay, now, that's one thing. Now, when we were going through that, admittedly, we were focusing on ownership, right? Big firm owns everything, we break it up. Two firms want to come together, they want to own everything, and we just don't allow them to do it. Horizontal merger, or as I take a drink of Coke, it's like a product placement advertisement here. I drink Diet Pepsi too, just to make everybody okay. Or we prohibit a vertical merger. Okay, now what we're doing is talking about some things that firms can do by contract. So not ownership, but instead by a written agreement. And the first thing we're going to look at is a resale price maintenance agreement. Now, by the way, this is a fancy way of basically saying where a supplier tells a retailer, you have to charge this price. So we're going to put it in your store, but you have to charge this price. So imagine Samsung or Apple going to Verizon saying you have to charge these prices, right? Or HP or Dell at Best Buy saying these are the prices you have to charge. Okay? Now, with that said, right, the supplier probably has an interest somewhere in contract law whereby they want to protect their price, they want their product to be seen as a premium product, that type of thing. Yeah, okay, you get it. The problem, and of course in that contract there's probably some price profitability share. So for instance, they get 6% of whatever the profit margin would be. You get the idea. Okay. Now, is that legal? Right? Now, in most circumstances, it actually is legal. It's not desirable, right? But it's legal. But what it is, it's a force of control, right? It's a force of control, and that's what antitrust law, right, is designed basically to prohibit, is that level of control, where instead of owning the retail outlets like you might in a vertical merger, well, essentially what you can do is control the reality through a contract, okay? So, for the most part, these are illegal. Now, the reality, however, is in the United States, this almost never happens, right? Generally, suppliers basically say, okay, this is what you have to get me in terms of return on my product, right? Could be a dollar amount, could be a percentage amount, it doesn't matter. But Best Buy or Verizon has at least enough flexibility in their own marketing and pricing strategies to make it work on their own, right? So they have a little bit of flexibility to price products where they want to, okay? Okay. Now, again, and wholesalers may want to give, if you really think about it, wholesalers may really want to give, wholesalers being suppliers, right? So Dell, Inc. might want to give Best Buy enough flexibility anyway. Okay, really depends on what they're trying to achieve with their product. Okay, the next is predatory pricing. Okay, now this is kind of seen as a reverse form of antitrust, or I should say of control, that antitrust law might want to address. Okay, now predatory pricing is basically lowball pricing, right, to try to drive out competition, right? And it generally happens in one of two ways. One, where a firm just has a big pile of cash and they're going to sell their products at below cost to drive other firms out of the market, and then when they get to the point where they've driven everybody out, then they jack up their price. Now, obviously that takes a huge financial reserve, okay? The other, and something you're more likely going to see happen, is where a retailer will adopt a loss leader strategy. Some products below cost to draw people into the store, right? Whereby, since we know shoppers are so incredibly busy, this is just our own marketing research, that once you get them into a store, they'll buy everything else that they want, right? Think about your large discount retailers, Target, Walmart, etc. If you can get people into the store, right, by attracting them to that real lowball price, right, maybe they'll buy everything else up, okay? Now, for the most part, right, with some exceptions, this is not a violation of antitrust law in this country. If you want to engage in a predatory pricing structure, that's fine, all right? Now, it can be a tort. And now, again, this is us getting into law, and I don't want to go into it too far, but I'm just telling you, it might be a violation of law. It just wouldn't be antitrust. It might be tort law, all right? And it would be wrongful interference with a business relationship. All right. For the most part, those cases are really tough to win. So if you're the victimized firm who can't compete, chances are you're going to lose any type of action under that tort, right? Any type of action regarding wrongful interference with a business relationship. Okay. All right, so again, predatory pricing, hey, if you've got the bank account to do it, great, you can do it. Okay, now, something I find even more fascinating than the first two, the resale price maintenance agreements and predatory pricing structures, is really the, let me get this sucker out of there. Is really the tying arrangement. So what happens here, as a retailer will be told by a wholesaler or a supplier, if you're going to sell this, you got to sell this with it. Right? If you're going to sell our product A, you got to sell B with it, right? It's basically bundling, right? So selling two movies together, right? Or if you're going to sell one of our tractors in your store, you have to sell the snow removal equipment with it. Okay? Now, these are illegal. All right, in this country, tying arrangements are illegal. That suppliers cannot force retailers to sell two goods together in the same package, right, or together in the same deal, the same contract, what have you. And frankly, it is actually very rare, but blatantly illegal. Price maintenance agreements, for the most part, yeah, illegal. Predatory pricing, not at all, right? And again, you're just looking at the tort, and even the tort might not get you very far if you're the victimized firm. But when it comes to a tying arrangement, these tend to be blatantly illegal. Now, for the most part, what we have learned, however, is that consumers like choices, and they like to pick and choose and buy one item at a time. And again, if they're going to buy them together, they'll probably do it anyway, so you don't have to have this tying arrangement. And a lot of times they might say, I want this tractor, but I like the other snow removal equipment, assuming that it's compatible with the one that I'm buying. That's fine. Okay? Consumers will generally go ahead and buy what it is that they want. Now, why the controversy? Again, when it comes to antitrust law, there are people that think that we should have greater antitrust enforcement. Then there are people, and again, I go to these conferences, and there are people that should be no antitrust law, right? None whatsoever. Hey, if you want to be big and you can take over the world, do it, right? If two firms want to get together and try to control a market, let them do it, right? That maybe instead of antitrust, all right, maybe use regulation. If you remember, that was something else that we talked about the governments could do. It's like, hey, big firm, if you want to have all this kind of power, that's great, but we're going to tell you what price we're going to charge. We may force you to engage in compulsory licensing of your intellectual property, whether you like it or not. Okay, there might be, but there are people that absolutely believe that, hey, resale price maintenance agreements, suppliers should be able to do that. Tying arrangements, suppliers should be able to do that. Predatory pricing, again, not really a violation of antitrust law in this country, but firms should just be able to do it if they wish. So it's pretty significant stuff. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop there, and we will pick up on Wednesday. All right. Thank you.